their performance or their behaviors in the workplace. So last week we talked about how it is very important for us to understand human behavior in the workplace if we are to manage it, right? Because the organization is reliant on that behavior. An organization relies on group behavior and individual behavior to be able to survive and to be able to adapt to the different changes that are going on in the environment out there. Okay? So then we backtrack that by saying if we are to accomplish that, we need to make sure that we start by understanding that individual behavior. Okay? And that's why we focus today on who the people are that we're bringing into our workplace, who they are. We were trying to paint a profile of who those people that are being hired and being paid salaries, who are they? Okay? Because we want to try to predict their behavior. We want to understand how they are likely to kind of exist in the workplace. What are they likely to do on a day-to-day basis? Are they likely to be helpful towards other employees? Are they likely to be people who are always pursuing training opportunities? Okay? So we're trying to get a better gauge as to who these people are, to understand what their results, what their outcomes in the workplace are going to be. And over time, we found in organizational behavior research or studies that to be able to predict that, it is a function of a variety of things. Okay? And some key categories or some key things that will predict people's behavior and performance in organizations are motivation is the first one, right? So the extent to which somebody is truly interested in putting an effort to do something, right? Are you motivated or are you not motivated? Are you simply in this job just for the perks, for the money of it? Or are you actually interested in delivering great work and great outcomes? Okay? And that's going to be our lecture that's coming up. We're going to be better understanding this process of motivation. Okay? And how people get motivated and what it is that sustains their motivation. So motivation is one of those factors or inputs that tells us something about whether employees are likely to behave in a good manner that we give a thumbs up to, or not really. Okay? Another aspect is ability, right? And that is kind of like your aptitudes and the things that you learn, the skills that could be learned. Okay? So are you someone who is able to do math? Right? So there are a lot of job postings today that you dealt with in your group work that required, analytical abilities or mathematical skills, or maybe knowledge of some sort of software, let's say, how to use Excel, how to kind of create formulas in Excel, right? So those are things that fall under that ability component, right? Because somebody might be very motivated to be an accountant. They might really, 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 really like the work of accountants, and they really want to work for PwC or Deloitte. But if they don't know how to add 2 plus 2, well, what are you going to do with them at PwC or Deloitte, right? So that's why motivation as well as ability is something that we need to consider when we're looking for the right applicants or the right candidates. And another thing that we have to consider when we're trying to predict or better understand how good people are going to perform in the organization is their perception surrounding the role, okay? So do they understand the job? Do they understand what it takes to succeed in the job? Okay? Do they know what the different duties that fall under the job are? How decent are their expectations, or how aligned are their expectations surrounding the job? So imagine somebody wanting to work as a police officer, but they haven't built it into their expectations that they're going to be in dangerous situations. There's a bit of a mismatch there. Okay? So it's all about the applicant or the person entering this job understanding what it takes to succeed, what are some things that they should expect on the job, right? So if a job has a certain emotional toll associated with it, if you work as a nurse, right, you're dealing with very tough cases on a day-to-day basis. Are you someone who is resilient enough to be able to deal with those cases that you're going to be dealing with every day in the hospital? Okay? So those are some things that we consider when it comes to role perceptions. And apart from all of that, okay, another thing that also builds into this model, or that kind of could predict whether somebody is going to be a superstar performer in the workplace, or whether it's going to kind of trump their performance in the workplace, is also what is going on outside, right? So you often hear people saying like, I love my colleagues, the workplace is great, but the leader, the team leader, the manager we have, our team manager is just kind of crushing us. He or she is not somebody that is truly giving us meaningful work, for example. So he's not somebody who's giving us challenges. Maybe the manager is a micromanager. Okay? So when we talk about situational factors, we're kind of focusing on things that are external to the person. Okay? So it might be that an organization only cares about generating money, but they don't care about client relationships. And let's say you're someone who's very relational, that's going to affect your performance a bit. Okay? So that's what we're talking about when it comes to situational factors. The leadership in the organization is not good. They don't care about the people, right? So those are some things that could affect employees' behavior in the workplace, and that would count under the situational category. Okay? Any questions so far about this first part of the model? Okay. Now, also kind of taking us a bit deeper into it and understanding what drives these three factors, motivation, ability, and role perceptions. We also have a variety of factors that help predict them, or that help dictate how people will develop their motivation, their ability, and their role perceptions. And those are things like personality, your values, your self-concept, so how you define yourself as a person, your general perceptions, your emotions and attitudes. So here we're really digging into who that person is and the different facets of who they are as individuals or as human beings, right? And today we're going to be focusing on personality and values, okay? And then as we move forward in the semester, we're going to be touching on things like emotions and attitudes and how those affect us in the workplace. We're going to be touching on perceptual ability, and we're going to be touching on things like stress. But today we're concerned with that first piece of the model, which is personality and values, okay? Because they do hold some weight in predicting your motivation, ability, and perceptions, which then predict your individual behavior. Okay? Are we cool on the model? Do we understand how we're working through this? Okay. Now, we talked a lot about performance and behavior, just to give us a better understanding as to what performance could look like in the workplace, or the major categories of performance and behavior that we are interested in studying in the workplace or in organizational behavior. We have the first one is your basic type of performance that you would expect, which is task performance, right? So I hired you to do those job duties. How are you performing on the tasks that fall under those duties, right? So I hired you as an accountant. How are you doing in terms of developing balance sheets and all that type of work, okay? So that is kind of, at a very basic level, that is what task performance is. It's how are you doing your work? How are you delivering outcomes pertaining to your duties? And there are three facets to task performance, okay? The very basic one is the proficient task performance, and that is really exactly, again, how are you doing on the job? So how are you doing at adding numbers together as an accountant, essentially? Something as basic as that. Another facet of task performance is adaptive performance, and that is how are you reacting to changes in the workplace or the way we work? Okay? So let's say there's a new software, there's a new technology emerging that makes accounting easier. Are you someone who is being good at learning those new technologies or those methodologies? Are you keeping up with the times, right? So that's why we call it adaptive. And are you someone who's adaptable to these changes that could affect your work and how you do your work? Okay? And lastly, we have the proactive facet. And that is, are you someone who is a go-getter? Are you someone who takes initiative? Are you someone who, stands up and puts their name up to do work? So that's what we're trying to capture under the proactive facet of task performance. Okay? Questions about task performance?
Excuse me, the last one, the
Yeah.
I didn't get the last one you said. Yeah.
So proactive is kind of like, are you actually kind of going above and beyond for your job, for the work that you're doing? Okay, so are you kind of innovating in how you go about doing your accounting? Are you always making sure that your work is done on time, and you're even taking it one step ahead, and you're making sure it's done to a T, right? So it's all about that diligence that you're exhibiting and how you go about doing your work. Okay, so kind of if you want to think about proficient, it's kind of like, do you do your work or not, right? Mm-hmm. And then proactive, it's like, are you taking it a step further? Okay. The second type of behavior that we are concerned with, or the second type of a different type of performance in the workplace that we are concerned with, is what we call organizational citizenship behavior, or the acronym for it is OCB. And from the name of it, if you want to focus to better understand it, focus on the citizenship part. And here we're concerned with, is the employee someone who truly values their workplace and sees their workplace as somewhere where they are a citizen? Are they truly treating this workplace as their home in a sense? Are they being nice to their colleagues? Are they helping out their colleagues? Are they being collegial? Okay? So that's what we're concerned with under organizational citizenship behaviors. Are you going above and beyond to help others? Are you cooperating with your manager? Are you cooperating with your colleagues, right? Are you volunteering on committees in the workplace? Like, are you volunteering on the diversity committee in the workplace to make your workplace a more cohesive environment and a better place, right? So that's what we're concerned with under OCB. It may not be things that you're being paid for, right? So if you volunteer on the diversity committee at work, this is not necessarily something that is laid out in your contract. You haven't signed to do it as part of your contract. But you do it because you care about your organization, you're a citizen of your organization, and you truly want to make your organization a better place to work. Okay? So that's why things like that fall under OCB. Or the reason why you help out a colleague, it's because you want to make sure that everyone benefits. Okay? Anyone else still have a question?
Yeah, what's the best way to predict that an employee's going to be like that?
That an employee is going to contribute, is going to do OCBs in the workplace?
What's the best way to...
Let's kind of keep, we're going to be talking about after we cover the personality portion, right? And again, there are several ways. Today we're focusing on how personality relates to it. So the short answer is personality. Some personality traits tell us something about that, but there are other things, right? Like past experience could be a telltale. Third, we have counterproductive work behaviors, CWBs, and those are the things that we don't want to see in the workplace. So if you're someone who doesn't help out your colleagues, if you're someone who kind of sabotages their colleagues, if you're someone who hides information in the workplace and you don't share information that could be pertinent for getting the work done, that's counterproductive work behaviors. Things like theft, right? So let's say you're stealing from your employer. That is a counterproductive work behavior, perhaps. Okay? So those are things that we want to reduce. Okay? Whereas OCBs are probably things we want to increase. Fourth, we have retention and turnover. So retention is that concept of making sure that people join the organization, but they also choose to stay in the organization. They don't leave after 6 months. They don't leave after a year. They are actually interested and motivated to stay. We retain them. Okay? And personality does tell us something about retention. Some people, just by virtue of who they are as people, they are more likely to always be hopping around. Okay? Whereas other people tend to be kind of people who do prefer stability and staying for a while. Okay? So that's what retention is concerned with. Turnover is another related concept, and that's focusing on when people actually leave the organization. So when we talk about things like, are they turning over? Are they showing signs of wanting to turn over? Essentially, we're saying, are they showing signs of wanting to pick up and leave? Are they looking for other jobs already? Are they not interested in contributing to this workplace anymore, and they're ready to just wave goodbye and head out the door? Okay, so that's what we're concerned with there. And lastly, we have the behaviors of absenteeism and presenteeism. So absenteeism, are you calling in sick every Friday so you get a long weekend? Or are you truly diligent and showing up to work, and do you care about the results that you're producing in the workplace? Okay. Absenteeism doesn't necessarily have to be something, that the employee is doing just because they want a long weekend. It could also be an indication that, let's say, in jobs that are rough, like where people work in rough conditions. So let's say in construction, or where you're always working outside, or like flight attendants, for example. If we notice high absenteeism rates, that could be telling us something about the job condition. It might not be the person themselves. Okay? So the person may not be just doing it because they want a long weekend. It could be that Air Canada, let's say, is not really providing their flight attendants with good working conditions, and the flight attendants are always sick. Okay? So that is something else that we could kind of pick up on from this type of behavior. And lastly, we have presenteeism. And presenteeism is when you're showing up to work, but really you don't have the capacity to work. Physically, or psychologically even, you just cannot contribute work because you're maybe ill, maybe let's take the flight attendant example again. The flight attendant might be showing up to his or her job, so they are present in the workplace, but they're so tired that they're actually not functioning optimally. They can't contribute all their energy and their effort. Okay? And that's not good because, again, it tells us something. Maybe it tells us that the leader or the boss is not very caring about the employees, and employees feel a threat that they have to show up regardless or they'll get fired, right? So those are some of the things that behaviors tell us in the organization. Any questions about the last few things that we covered in terms of individual behaviors?
Excuse me, can we say that the OCB is located under the proactive?
OCB, yeah, it may relate to it for sure. Especially, like, let's say you're collaborating with a colleague, you're sharing information with a colleague, then it's like task related, right? But although generally when we think of organizational citizenship behaviors, we don't think of them as like related to the tasks.
Okay.
But I could see where you could make the link. But generally we think of them as like, are you volunteering on the diversity committee? Are you like setting up a bake sale in the office? Are you doing charity work? Like it's more things like that we focus.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions pertaining to individual behavior? Okay. Now, personality, let's start by going over how we define it or how we approach it in organizational behavior. Personality, again, is that relatively stable set of characteristics that tells us something about how you feel, how you behave as an individual, how you think as an individual, and how you react to your environment. Okay? So, again, one key aspect of it that we have to focus on is it's the relatively stable set of characteristics or traits that we have as human beings that predict how we go about doing what we do every day. Okay? Personality, part of it is derived kind of innately from our genetics, by virtue of our genetics, so those are the predispositions that we have. And then another part of it is from our long-term learning history. So in our kind of developmental years, kind of how that is shaped, that's what we mean by that long-term learning history. It's not kind of something recent that you did yesterday and that counts. No, it has to be something more profound, something that's happened over time. And one way that we understood or we started approaching the study of behavior in organizations and how we tie personality into it, we also went through a bit of an evolution as researchers or as how we, or as just in general society and how we understand human behavior and particularly in organizations. So when it came to understanding how personality fits in, we've gone through different perspectives or approaches, and those are the dispositional, the situational, and the interactionist approach. The dispositional approach to kind of understanding personality or understanding behavior in organizations really emphasizes kind of the fact that personality, okay, or your predispositions will dictate how you'll behave, and nothing else matters. It is solely who you are as a person that will dictate how you will behave in an organization or in a social context. And nothing else should be considered. Okay? So, an example of that could be, let's say somebody rates high on extroversion. Okay? Regardless of where they are, they will always be acting in an extroverted manner. They will always be activated, they will always be energetic, they will always be socializing. Okay? So that is a perspective that truly emphasizes the predispositions, the traits that the person has, and says it all depends on that trait or on that characteristic, and that's what's going to dictate their behavior. Nothing else matters. Now, extroversion is something that is good for, like, let's say you're at a networking session. Now, extroversion is probably going to do you some good there, right? You're going to want to be activated, you're going to want to show some energy, you're going to want to talk to as many people as possible. But let's say you're in an environment that doesn't require that much energy. You're at home relaxing, okay? You're in class listening to a lecture, okay? That may not require extroversion. So if we are to only adopt this dispositional approach where we say your traits, your characteristics that you're predisposed with will dictate how you go about life, okay? There's a bit of a shortcoming there in that you're assuming that the person will always be static or will always act in the same way regardless of what they're dealing with. Okay? So let's say I'm interacting with someone and that person is a very quiet person, they're very mellow, they're very mild-tempered, right? You're probably going to want to adjust to your extroversion, even though generally you're an extroverted person. But human beings must always be reading their situation. They should always be reading the environment and understanding who they're interacting with, understanding what it is that they're doing. So let's say you're at work doing accounting work. You're not needing to be activated. You're not needing to show a great level of energy. Okay? So that's why we must know something more. We can't always just focus on your predispositions and think that your genetics or your traits and characteristics are the be-all, end-all. There's more to it. Okay? And then the other side of it, if you want the other extreme of it, is the situational approach. And that is an approach that says behavior, okay, is fully dictated by the external environment and what is going on kind of in the context of work. So it may focus on things like, you know, are the roles clarified? Is the leadership in the organization good? Essentially what they're saying under the situational approach is that really the situation and the characteristics of the context are really what dictate everything. So you could have an introverted person or an extroverted person. It really doesn't matter as long as we have those task characteristics or organizational characteristics. That's all that matters. Okay? So like it's like saying Deloitte doesn't really require conscientious people or extroverted people or introverted people. It really doesn't matter who we hire. All that matters is that we have a great brand, right? So you're focusing on that situation, on that characteristic of the organization. But yeah, it's great that Deloitte has a great brand, but unless you have people who are a good fit and the right profile of human capital to drive your effort, you're not going to generate good behaviors in the organization.
What if, let's say a person is hired and they're a perfect fit for the job, they have a good personality, good behavior, but after they're hired and they're working there, what if something, what if the employee faces some type of external
Pressure in life.
pressure and
Okay.
pressure, and then it changes their behavior. Do the employers have the right to fire them if their behavior becomes kind of negative?
I mean,
or
it's,
something?
that's a very broad way to approach it.
Yeah.
There are different kind of situations. So let's say one thing that we talk about in HR is how we deal with things, let's say like substance abuse or addictions or alcoholism, right? So let's say your employee is showing signs of their performance has been declining, right? And it may be due to substance abuse, right? One thing that we teach our students in HR is the first step is never to just fire the person, right? Especially when it comes to addictions, that is a disability. So the first thing that you would be doing as an employer is you would be framing it in the sense that we are concerned about your performance that has been declining over the past year. What is going on? Is there something that we could help you with? Is there something in the workplace that we should be adjusting to maximize your performance? Is there something in your work-life balance that needs work, right? So there are different avenues that you would take to kind of figuring out what is going on, but you would never, firing the employee right away is not the first step. You want to do some more delving deeper into it, right? Let's say it's an alcoholism problem or something related to substance abuse. You'd want to kind of offer them options in terms of like rehabilitation services and all of that. It might end up being a situation where they have to take a leave without pay, but you're going to say, like, take this time, work on what you need to work on personally, and then come back.
Yeah.
If we find that, you know, the person maybe is not ready to come back, like that's where there's another step where there's more assessments here, where we're going to engage in more conversation. So it really matters. Sometimes it could be something like a work-life balance issue. If something is happening in their external life outside of work, it might be that, okay, they need an extra day to work from home in the week. Okay? So it really depends. Okay? What do you know?
Are we talking about, when we're looking at the three different aspects, are we talking about the first two being bad, but it's used to the extreme, and it's a combination that would be most effective?
So, we're going to. Okay. So essentially, going to our very final approach, and the approach that we actually recommend in organizations. If you remember last week, we talked about the contingency approach to management. Okay? And we talked about how you should always be reading the situation. You should always be making sure that you understand what is going on, because it always depends. You should not be fixated in one way of doing things. There is no one best way to manage. We live in an open system. Everything is changing all the time. Everything is irrational. So we cannot be very rigid in our approach. We have to show some flexibility. And that's the exact same thing here. If you're only focusing on predispositions versus if you're only focusing on the situation, there's a risk there. You're being too rigid in your approach. Okay? So that's why the interactionist approach came about, and that's where we're advocating that we consider both personality and situation. Okay? Because again, as someone who rates high on extroversion, not every situation requires you to be extroverted. Okay? So you need to make sure that you're activating your extroversion in situations that require extroversion. If the situation does not require extroversion, you're really wasting a lot of energy, and you're not really channeling it in the right manner. Okay? So that's one way we approach personality and behavior in organizations, and how the two come together, is we take into account your predispositions and who you are as a person, essentially, but also we have to consider the situation. Okay? Some people are very energetic people, but they go into an office environment that is very quiet, and there's no cohesion, and there is no collegiality, there is no team participation. And sometimes that kind of like puts them down, and they're not able to truly channel that extroversion. Okay? So a lot of things are at play. And that's why when we talk about kind of like personality, there's only one thing that we consider when we're hiring people. Sometimes we may put them in a mock situation where they have to exhibit teamwork, okay? Team building abilities. Okay? We're trying to see how they react to different situations. It's not all about just seeing how they rate on paper. Okay? Does that answer your question? Some more things about situations or the context in which we operate in. One thing about how we understand situations, we think of them as in two categories of weak versus strong situations. Weak situations are kind of environments or contexts where they're more casual, there's more flexibility, the rules are not set, there aren't as many norms, the consequences are not necessarily high or they're not there. So when you're hanging out with your friends, you're probably in a weak situation, right? There aren't that many norms, there aren't that many rules. You're comfortable in being who you are and expressing yourself to your fullest with your friends. Whereas when you're in the workplace or you're with you're in class or you're in a meeting, that's what's considered to be a stronger situation. Okay? That's where there are some certain norms that society said, we should do that in this type of setting. There might be some rules, there might be some consequences. So if you misbehave in class, you will get kicked out, right? So this is a strong situation. It has all these things built into it, and they govern the way that we behave in those types of settings. Okay? Personality has the strongest effect, or truly kind of flourishes or comes to be in weak situations, because again, the risks are low, the stakes are low, nothing is kind of governing how you behave. So you have a lot of leeway to kind of express yourself to the fullest. Okay? In HR, we talk about structured versus unstructured interviews. So you may have gone through an interview where you're sitting down with the interviewers and they're going through a set of questions, and it's very rigid, it's very regimented, and they're rating you. And then you may go into other types of interviews where it's an unstructured interview and it's very conversational. You go in and they're like, tell us about yourself. Tell us what you're looking to get out of this job. Who are you going to be in the next 5 to 10 years, right? So it's much more casual. So that is a weaker situation. And what they're trying to do is trying to get you to express yourself in the most authentic way possible. Okay? So that's how we kind of consider strong and weak situations in tandem with personality and behavior in the workplace. Any questions at this point? Okay. So let me just recap. So again, one of the key things that you should take away from this model, apart from that behavior is governed, or that is predicted by motivation, ability, and perceptions, which are then governed by personality and values for our purposes today. One thing to keep in mind is personality by itself is not enough to give us a good prediction of behavior. The situational factors are very important. Understanding the setting that you're operating in tandem with who you are as a person, that is what we need to know. We need to know those two pieces of information. Okay? It's not enough to just fixate on personality or just fixate on situational factors. It's important that we bring the two perspectives together. Okay? That's what that interactionist approach is telling us. That's when we could truly understand what your behavior is likely to be like in the organization. Okay? Questions? Last chance for questions about this model. Okay. Now, in terms of delving deeper into personality and the different facets of personality or the dimensions of it, that is something that you may have already noticed as part of your personality assessment and the scoring that emerged from it. So we found over time, after a lot of research has been done on personality, that there are 5 main dimensions or 5 main personality traits that give us a good idea surrounding who people are, and it gives us a good way of assessing or predicting their behavior and their performance. Okay? And that is captured by this 5-factor model. Okay? And those traits or those dimensions are conscientiousness, agreeableness, openness to experience, neuroticism, or emotional stability is the other side of it. And lastly, extroversion versus introversion being the other side of it. Okay? So, tell me, extroversion, what is that all about? Some keywords, throw them, no need for hands.
Group working.
Friendly, other stuff?
Group working.
What was that?
Group working.
Okay, so you thrive in social settings. Okay, other stuff surrounding extroversion? Outgoing. Okay. This class is not very extroverted because I'm like waiting here. Come on.
Curious.
Curiosity, right? What is another facet that may relate to that curiosity from there? Openness to experience relate to curiosity. Okay, other stuff about extroversion?
Very expressive.
Expressive, okay. Let's move on to another one. Openness to experience, since we're already sort of touching on that. What is that one all about?
Risk-taking.
Risk-taking, okay, so you're dabbling with new things all the time.
Observational.
Okay, perhaps, yeah. Other stuff, yeah. Adaptability, okay. Really?
Kind of like a knowledge seeker.
Okay, so you're always looking to learn something new. Yeah. One thing about openness to experience is kind of like most people think of it as like, oh, open to like trying new foods from different cultures. And like that's true, that is part of it. But also it does transcend beyond that. Like it could be people who are interested or curious about different religions, different ways of life, different ways that people kind of go about living and surviving. So it could be kind of at a higher level, more abstract.
It also adds to the fact that that's kind of a lifestyle, almost.
Yeah.
Because you're able to implement that in all aspects of your life.
Sure, that's great, yeah. No.
I was going to say driven, because when you're open to experience, you're more content.
Okay, it could be a motivating factor.
Yeah.
Okay, perhaps. Okay, moving on to another one. Neuroticism or emotional stability. What is that one all about? Oh my goodness, come on.
Rigidity.
Okay. So you're someone who doesn't deal well with changes. You're only fixed in this one way of doing things, and anything else phases you. Okay.
Specific.
You're very specific. Okay, yeah, perhaps you like things a certain way.
You may always think a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
Closed-minded.
Okay, perhaps. Other things about neuroticism?
Being positive or negative.
What was that?
Looking at stuff positive or negative.
Okay, so yeah, you may be kind of, yeah, obviously maybe you obsess over the negatives of things when you're neurotic, okay?
Being a perfectionist.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so those are some things pertaining to emotional stability, how we handle even other people's emotions, how we read others' emotions, and how we react to that, how we read the situation, that could be a relevance to it. Agreeableness, tell me some more about agreeableness, should be an easy one.
Works well with others.
Works well with others.
Nice.
No. Agreeableness.
Friendly.
Easygoing, friendly, okay. Do we always want more agreeableness? Think of like organizations or the workplace or group work. Do we always want high agreeableness? Shannon, tell us.
No, because people probably take advantage of you.
For sure, taking advantage of someone is one way that it negatively impacts us, yes? Jason?
If someone's always agreeing in a situation, means the company can't grow. You know, you need data.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, any other thoughts? Yeah?
May not be able to get anywhere.
Exactly, right? So yeah, especially when it comes to team settings, okay? Settings that require a lot of brainstorming, let's say, a lot of innovation, a lot of creativity. you want some level of agreeableness, but if you find that you're working in a group of everybody is just nice to everybody and nobody is disagreeing with everybody and nobody is challenging anybody else in the group, you're never going to generate that innovative solution. You're never going to get somewhere, right? So they may take advantage of you, right? If you're somebody who's doing all the work for the group and nobody else wants to do the work because you're very agreeable and they took advantage of you, you can see that happening. Yep.
Also, if your job requires you to like advocate or like resist of their opinion.
For sure.
you get-
If you're in negotiations, if that's part of your job, right, you cannot always just say yes to everything. So yeah, that's why agreeableness, you have to be kind of a bit moderate about it. And in general, moderation is good, kind of, when it comes to personality. As we said, you have to always be lenient, you have to be flexible, always be reading the situation and what it requires. Okay? So not every situation requires agreeableness. And in organizations, we don't always want, the highest levels of agreeableness. We want people who are challenging others, disagreeing with others.
I just want to say that I'll get back to you.
Come back. Let me know next week. Let me know.
Yeah, I was just going to say that in order to improve, you need to have a devil's advocate because they may
For
see
sure.
things.
Yeah,
something
absolutely.
that-
Especially as a team, right? Absolutely. Okay. And the very last one, conscientiousness. What is conscientiousness all about? That may be one that you haven't heard of before. Tell me more about conscientiousness. What do we think of when we hear conscientiousness? Yeah. Go ahead. Okay, could be. Somebody who's conscientious. Why do you say skeptical?
Because they always have to, I think they always have to question whether 90 or
I would say that might be more linked to neuroticism. Okay. Other thoughts? Yeah.
I don't know what the exact word would be right, but like someone who's able to plan, like make a goal and make plans to do it
Yeah.
efficiently.
Somebody who's very diligent, they have their eyes set on something, they are driven by that outcome, by that goal, and they work towards it. Dylan,
Reliable.
reliability,
Hardwork.
hardworking,
Aware.
awareness of
Attention to detail.
attention to detail, awareness of like deadlines, right? So if we're working towards deadlines, awareness of that, awareness of like how your decisions impact others. Potentially, not necessarily conscientiousness, but okay. Determined, right? See it? Yeah, sorry.
They might be a little bit more strict in their ways because they want stuff to, like you said, they're diligent and they're conscious about how they want everything to work in place so they can get stuff done by the deadline.
I'd say that's more probably linked to neuroticism. Okay, but yeah, it could be a mix of like conscientiousness and neuroticism could lead to that for sure. Noah, who wants to- who's that? A planner, right? Yeah. So when you go
They
ahead.
have confidence in themselves and their abilities. to-
Confidence. Yeah. So yeah, when we think about conscientiousness, we're painting that image of someone who's very diligent, someone who's all about accomplishing things. They're a go-getter. They're about setting goals for themselves. So that's what we picture when we think of someone who's conscientious. Now, we said that the generally personality and personality traits. Some situations require them, some situations may not require their activation. So you don't always have to be extroverted. Some situations may require you to be extroverted, but others may not. The one exception to that rule is when it comes to conscientiousness and when it comes to job performance. When we're looking to understand how people are likely to perform on their job, regardless of what that job is, we want to see high levels of conscientiousness. Okay? Because that is the one trait that tells us something about their work ethic. It tells us about how diligent they are. So regardless of what job you're hiring for, you want somebody who's conscientious. You don't want somebody who's low on conscientiousness, right? So that is the one that transcends across all jobs, across all occupations, okay? Conscientiousness is the best predictor of job performance across all jobs. So today, all the jobs that you covered, whether it's the plumber, the psychiatrist, the flight attendant, the customer service representative, we all want a conscientious person for those jobs. Okay? Now, yeah, when it comes to customer service rep versus psychiatrist, maybe the CSR, yeah, you need a highly extroverted person there, but for the psychiatrist job, you may need somebody who's more introverted, let's say, or somebody who's better able to adjust their levels of introversion and extroversion. Okay? So that's how we see the difference there. But in terms of conscientiousness, that is the one that we really crave across all occupations. if there is one thing you should be writing down in your notes right now, it is that don't put it in my spelling, my pronunciation. Conscientiousness is the best predictor of job performance across all occupations. Okay? Do you want to say it all together just so that it gets really ingrained? No? Conscientiousness is the best predictor of job performance across all occupations. We're good?
So one more time.
Okay. Any questions about conscientiousness? I know we're doing a multiple choice exam, but usually I'm very intense on the spelling of conscientiousness. Most students confuse it with consciousness. Consciousness is whether you're alive or not alive. That doesn't tell me squat for the workplace. It's not going to tell me if you're a good accountant or not. Okay? If you're alive but you can't add 2 plus 2, you're really not doing much for me as an accountant. Conscientiousness is the one we're concerned with here. Okay, Lavina?
Could we throw around the term being able to be, like, have good time management skills in that section?
Yeah, it could be something that falls under that. So time management is predicted by conscientiousness. So someone who's conscientious is likely to manage their time well. Okay? So like behavior, predisposition. Right? Okay. And I believe I added a slide with extra explanation. Yes, so what I did is I just included some things from my other book that I use, just to give you a more well-rounded idea as to what the traits are all about and what types of jobs are a good fit for those traits or that might require those traits. So just additional info to keep in mind. Yeah.
How do you guys rate someone for those stuff to say yes or no, I don't know?
That was the personality assessment that you guys did.
Yeah, I did.
So it assessed you on conscientiousness, openness to experience, neuroticism, right? You got scores on the 5.
I didn't do that. I didn't know that.
You didn't do.
I don't even know where is it.
I posted it in the announcement. So do the personality assessment, and then you'll see how we assess your most. It's usually on a Likert type scale, so like 1 to 5 rate your agreement or disagreement with each of these questions. Okay? No.
Yeah, when you got your results from the test, it gave you like a percentage of
Yeah.
what there was like categories within
Within each dimension.
Yeah.
Yeah, because even within agreeableness, there's like different things that span agreeableness, right? So that's what that is. Okay. Okay, and then finally to wrap up kind of that piece of the lecture surrounding personality and individual behavior, some things that we see, some correlations. When it comes to proficiency in task performance, we usually look for conscientiousness and extroversion. Extroversion because somebody who's extroverted is more likely to kind of collaborate with coworkers. They're more likely to seek advice and seek opinions on how they should go about doing something. So that generally improves their work performance. Adaptive task performance, so remember that was one where you're always keeping up with the times, picking up new methodologies, picking up new ways of doing things. So you might need some level of extroversion there. Openness to experience is probably like a pivotal one for it. And then emotional stability, because again, as you guys said, you want someone who's not rigid, someone who's not fazed by things. So when you're bringing in new approaches, you want them to be able to take that with confidence. Proactive task performance, that's where some openness to experience and extroversion and energy will help there. In terms of the other types of behaviors that we see when it comes to organizational citizenship behaviors, so that was the one that Noah was asking about. Generally, the types of people that we see that exhibit high levels of OCB are people who are highly conscientious and highly agreeable, right? So think about people who are volunteering on a diversity committee at work, okay? They are likely the type of people who are very diligent about helping others, right? And they love to affiliate with different people and to be very social and helpful. So that's where you could see those 2 traits coming to be. When it comes to counterproductive work behaviors, here we're talking about a negative relationship. So when we have someone who's high on agreeableness and high on conscientiousness, that usually decreases counterproductive work behaviors. So someone who is highly conscientious, they're not going to sabotage their coworkers. They're not going to steal from their workplace. They're not going to hide information in their workplace. Okay? Similarly, someone who's high on agreeableness, They care about others, so they're not going to sabotage others. Okay, so that's why this one specifically is a negative relationship. So that's just another way to kind of understand how the two come together. Questions about this picture or any of these other behaviors that we talked about early on in the lecture? Okay. Why don't we take a 10-minute break, go do your thing, and we'll come back and wrap up with values in the workplace.